Matrix Home Solutions Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Amy under the weather today. She's out. Hopefully she'll feel better. Be back tomorrow. A decade ago, Denny McCann was killed on the streets of Chicago in a hit-and-run crash that was committed by a person in this country illegally. His name, the alleged perpetrator, Saul Chavez. And because of Cook County sanctuary state status, Tony Preckwinkle, in her infinite wisdom, and the Cook County power structure allowed Saul Chavez to escape, flee the country, and never be heard from again. Until recently, 10 years in the making, perhaps finally, the McCann family will get justice for their slain family member, Denny. Brian McCann is his brother. You've heard Brian McCann on the show before. You've seen him on television commercials because he spent the better part of the last decade advocating against sanctuary state and city and county policies, along with other families who have lost family members to people in this country illegally. And he's also done commercials for politicians like Jeannie Ives and Darren Bailey, who opposed sanctuary state, county, city policies, as Illinois is a sanctuary state, Cook County is a sanctuary county, Chicago is a sanctuary city, and so forth. And finally, maybe, we'll get justice for the McCann family. With more on this, where the case stands, where Saul Chavez finds himself finally. Pleased to be joined by Brian McCann. Brian, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Good to be with you.
So you sent out this email a couple days ago, which was surprising, just because it's been so long and because we know what immigration enforcement is like in this country. But it was positive news, a long time in the making. So tell us about Saul Chavez and where we stand today.
Yeah, the news, I guess you could say it's good news. I got a phone call Friday, roughly 4 o'clock, from Ann Sotomayor from Cook County. She's going to prosecute Chavez. She said Chavez is in the air, being escorted by Steve Molesky from the Chicago FBI office, and they're going to touch down at O'Hare at 6:59. That did, in fact, happen. I talked to Steve Sunday, and all went well. They got him through customs, and he's in Cook County Jail. And just yesterday, we had I guess you'd call it a preliminary hearing in Cook County, and Anna briefed us on what was going to happen, and the judge, Kenworthy, in her courtroom, told Chavez was quarantined because I guess when you come in from out of the country, he has a quarantine, so he was on a video camera, seemingly rather docile, unable to speak English, so an interpreter, she told him what the judge said, that he would be given a public defender, and the charges were that he failed to show up for court. It was 11 years ago, not 10.
Okay. And
in violation of bond, and they added reckless homicide this time on top of the aggravated DUI, which was what the charge was before. And then there's going to be another hearing on the 21st the same courtroom, in the same judge's courtroom, and all indications are that everything's going to work out, and he will be found guilty. And I remain somewhat skeptical, however, because of what happened 11 years ago, and
Right.
the political winds in Cook County never fail to surprise we citizens. But the prosecutors seem to think it would nothing odd like that would happen. So I'm
How did
hopefully.
how did his capture happen? And do you think it would have happened? Would it have been on the FBI's radar to find Saul Chavez wherever he was,
Well,
if not for your family's efforts?
I must just. Steve is the third FBI agent assigned to the case in these 10, 11 years. The others seemingly were aggressive. They have a fugitive unit in the Chicago office, and these guys, they kept me apprised. I would call them every year or so, 6 months, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're on it, and we've got agents in Mexico looking for them," and it seemed hopeful. But it wasn't until Steve called me last spring, March or April, that he said, "It looks like we're getting pretty close." So he had a sort of confidence in his voice. And they finally got him, about 3 months ago, and he said it's going to take a little bit longer because there's an appellate process in the Mexican authorities, and that apparently was denied, and Steve flew down and got him. I did get a little angry a year ago. I couldn't find him on the FBI's most wanted list. I went on the computer and it wasn't on there, so I called the FBI office, and Steve called me, and I didn't know him at the time, and know of him at the time. He said he was assigned to the case. He says, "Oh, it is on it." I'm not sure why I couldn't find it, but I could not find it at all. So I wrote a letter to Ray, and Mayorkas took it off of his list too. The DHS had a most wanted list, and he was taken off that list. And then I looked in the FBI, and he was taken off that list. So that made me suspicious. So I bugged him, and all of a sudden it appears. So
that's
it
interesting.
should be easy to find. So I don't know if there's anything funny going on or not. All I know is that the principals involved have been very efficient the last few days. So
I mean, John Cass has written columns about this case, your brother's case, going back a decade when you were still at the Tribune, and since writing at johncassnews.com. I mentioned the profile that you've brought to the case. So that question about if what's your sense, and maybe even you've had this discussion with federal law enforcement, if you hadn't stayed on them, if there wasn't profile brought to this case in the media, do you think Saul Chavez is in a Cook County jail today?
Well, I like to think my letters and emails and phone calls and all the rest was helpful. They probably won't agree, but I did what I did, including bothering the senior senator from Illinois, who said he would look into it. I never got any feedback from him. I did get a call from a staff person, and she was useless. And he walked out of a hearing I gave in D.C. That's how interested he was. But I don't know. We filed a lawsuit with Judicial Watch. I don't know if I told you that, and that didn't go anywhere because Cook County court system. It was a mandamus. You lawyers understand all that mandamus talk. We weren't looking for any money. We were just looking to force DART to comply with the ICE detainers. And Judicial Watch, to its credit, did their due diligence, and through, FOIA requests, got all the data. And this is going back 7 or 8 years, and how many ICE detainers were denied in Cook County. And it's in the hundreds, and that was just over 1 year. I can only imagine it's in the tens of thousands in recent years. if I were a mayoral candidate, I would dig out those numbers and use them in this campaign. Because if Judicial Watch's numbers projected forward are accurate, and I have no reason to believe they're not, there's probably well over 10,000 detainers that have been denied by Cook County. Well, that's crazy. These guys are felons.
Right, so that's 10,000 people in this country illegally who've committed crimes. ICE wants them detained, and Cook County won't acquiesce.
Yes, and Cook County is just one of about 300 sanctuary jurisdictions in the country. In major cities, every major city that I'm aware of is sanctuary now. So just try to do the projections, millions perhaps.
You're part of this organization that includes other families who are similarly situated to yours. They've had a family member killed by a person in this country illegally. Tell us a little bit about that organization and sort of what you've learned over the last decade, being involved in the fight for justice for your brother and then these larger political policy issues.
Yeah, it's called Advocates for Victims of Illegal Alien Crime, aviac.us. We have a website, and we always welcome a little bit of help. aviac.us. We had a meeting last night, and we meet every other week over the phone, and I briefed him on today's interview, and I went over what I just went over with your audience. We work with other victims, and there's in fact a few months ago we had dinner with Steve Salvi out of Cleveland, and he chronicles all of the victims in the country by poring over news accounts, and because you can't get accurate figures from the government, so Steve does this on his own. So it's astonishing how many family members like my own have gone through this over the years, and our lament of late is that it doesn't get the attention. Now, the former president brought our cause to the attention of the country, and it was largely reported in conservative media, not in mainstream. But lately, our cause has been largely forgotten. So part of our meeting last night is what we're going to do about that. We're preparing a letter and a mailing with victims' booklets to every Congress member and new Congress member as well, because the Congress is going to change. And we like to think that the Judiciary Committee, Homeland Security Committee will become very active in this cause, and at least in the House. So we were strategizing last night on what we might do. Most of us have gone to Congress multiple times to testify, but we haven't lately for obvious reasons. But
and here's what you're up against with this administration. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, yesterday at a White House briefing, had this to say about border processing. Take a listen.
So we do have estimates of how many encounters there are at the border on a daily basis. We have processes and procedures in place to identify those individuals, to process them in an orderly fashion, and then to do what is appropriate based on that processing. And we have believed that system is a system that does an effective job of being able to determine who is coming across the border and what the right way to deal with their case is.
Yeah, the system does an effective job. There have been 1 million gotaways in this country since Biden took office.
Try to get Tom Holman on your call.
Oh, I know. We've had him. We've had him.
He'll set him straight.
Yeah.
He'll set him straight. The other issue that we're not involved in, but we've become allied with, is the fentanyl families. Federation of American Immigration Reform has recruited them into their camp, and that's astonishing what those families have gone through. The whole fentanyl issue, and in a kind of an odd sort of way, they've been more tragic than ours in a strange sort of way, because it happens to young people. But it's crazy.
Before we let you go, I just wanted to give you the opportunity again to tell Denny McCann's story, who your brother was, and then what happened to him on that night. Hopefully, finally getting justice more than a decade later.
Yeah, it was Logan Square, not far from the famous General Logan statue. He was calling on a friend, a client. He was a commercial insurance broker, and it was a Mexican restaurant, oddly enough. And this guy would prepare a certain brand of soup. My brother had a heart condition for him, and that was where he kind of hung out frequently. He lived up there. Anyhow, he's crossing Kedzie, I guess it is. I think it was Kedzie. And anyhow, Chavez was 4 times the legal limit, alcohol impaired, hit him and dragged him better part of a block, and ran over him twice. And fortunately, a young man, also of Hispanic origin, chased him down with the help of an off-duty cop, and they grabbed him, and he was arrested. This was around 7:00 on June 8th, 2011, and we were notified later that night by CPD. But we were assured by Cook County prosecutor at the time that this detainer would be in effect, it would hold him, and not to worry about, because we asked her, can he post bond? Oh, no. She explained what a detainer was. I didn't know what it was. And but Chewy Garcia and Tony Preckwinkle and a few other, about 8 or 9 other people on the county board thought otherwise. And that September passed the ordinance, and we were never told. And the prosecutor apparently wasn't ever told. So the Sunday before Thanksgiving, $25,000 was brought on a Sunday morning, and Chavez walked out.
He is Brian McCann, a brother of Denny McCann. The organization he's with now, aviac.us, you heard him mentioned, for similarly situated families. Brian McCann, thanks so much for joining us. You've done a great service for your brother and his memory and getting justice for him, in addition to so many other families, including those that you work with at AVIAC. We appreciate your time, as always. Thanks again, Brian.
Thanks so much, Dan. Appreciate it. Bye now.
And Brian joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I love giving jewelry as a gift, and Roland's Jewelers is the perfect place for that magical holiday gift. Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. Buying jewelry is about trust. Roland's is the jeweler I trust. I love that they're family-owned, hundreds of 5-star Google reviews. Getting engaged, Roland's has a huge selection of mined and lab-grown loose diamonds at terrific prices. Choose from beautifully designed engagement rings from designer Simon G. Italian designer Roberto Coin offers magnificent diamond pendants and earrings, or maybe a Tag Heuer watch with cutting-edge technology. Roland's staff is expertly trained to assist you. Mention AM 560. You'll get